Welcome to the National EMS Academy's online EMT program. This is the first of a three-part lesson on the cardiovascular system. In part one, we're going to discuss the functions of the cardiovascular system, then we'll go over the A and P of the heart. Let's start off by reviewing the most fundamental functions of our cardiovascular system. First, it carries various critical substances throughout the body, things like nutrients, hormones, etc. All of these will be delivered to the body's cells. Another of those critical substances transported are the blood cells. Blood cells help us to transport oxygen and support our immune system. We'll talk more about blood cells when we get to part 2. The blood also allows us to maintain a normal acid-base balance, which keeps pH within acceptable ranges. Finally, the blood itself is important in hemostasis. Now that's the big medical word for bleeding control. This is a protective mechanism where blood clotting components are delivered to an injury site to keep blood loss to a minimum. Now you probably notice there's a common theme here of transport or delivery, and that really is the essential function of our cardiovascular system. It is the critical system that keeps things moving from point A to point B in the body. There are 3 basic parts to this system. The heart, which is an incredibly powerful, efficient pump. The blood vessels, these are the pipes which we deliver the blood and its cargo throughout the body. And then there's the blood, the actual fluid transport mechanism. In this particular lesson, we're going to focus on the heart. All right, here's a very simple illustration of the heart. We've cut away the front half so you can get a glimpse at its internal structure. There are 4 chambers in the human heart. The 2 upper chambers are called atria. Here, I'll label them. The 2 lower chambers are called ventricles, and here's where they are. Now you're going to hear the terms right and left apply to the heart as well. The structure that divides the heart into its right and left halves is the septum, and it's right here. Remember, when we use the terms right or left in medicine, we're talking about the patient's right or left. The right side of the heart receives blood from the body and then pumps it to the lungs. The left side receives blood from the lungs and then pumps it to the rest of the body. And then it starts all over again thousands of times throughout your lifetime. Now the heart is made up primarily of cardiac muscle. I discussed that in the muscle lesson, and it's quite well done, even if I do say so myself. But the heart also contains some other tissue types, connective tissue and nervous tissue. Let's talk about the connective tissue first. The predominant connective tissue structures are the valves. The valves are critical in keeping the blood moving in the right direction. Remember that body to lungs and body stuff I talked about earlier? There are 4 valves you should know. First, these 2 atrioventricular valves. Let me write that down. Notice the term atrio and ventricular. This means they're located between the atria and the ventricles. Their names are the tricuspid valve here on the right side of the heart, and the bicuspid valve on the left side. Most people prefer to use the bicuspid's other name, the mitral valve. We also have what are known as semilunar valves. These are located in the 2 major arteries leaving each ventricle, the pulmonary artery and the aorta. They're located here on our illustration. Their names are pretty simple. The pulmonic valve in the pulmonic artery, the aortic valve in the aorta. Again, The valves are necessary to make sure the blood moves in the right direction. For example, when the right ventricle contracts, the blood is kept from returning to the right atria by a closed tricuspid valve. At the same time, the pulmonic valve opens and blood is allowed to leave the heart and the pulmonary artery. Remember, I said there was also some nervous tissue here. Well, let's look at that. You may recall, if you took that awesome muscle lesson, I mentioned that cardiac muscle has the ability to generate its own stimulus to contract. That's called automaticity. But even though the brain doesn't have to send a constant signal to the heart, we do have a built-in internal nervous system that helps our heart to beat in a very efficient manner. What we need to have happen is have the atria to contract first. This fills the ventricles. Then the newly filled ventricles will then contract and pump the blood to the lungs and the body. The nervous system helps the heart muscle coordinate this contraction. And let me show you how it works. Here are the structures. Up here in the right atrium, we have the sinoatrial, or SA node. Here in the upper septum, we have the atrioventricular, or AV node. Right below that, we have a bundle of nervous tissue called the bundle of His. From there, we have these two bundle branches that extend to each ventricle. Off of them are small fibers called Purkinje fibers that branch out throughout the ventricular walls. Now, in a normal beating heart, the SA node will initiate an impulse at a rate predetermined by the brain. The electrical stimulus spreads throughout the atria, causing them to contract. That stimulus also reaches the AV node, which holds on to it for a fraction of a second, which allows the atria to finish contracting and then relax. Then the AV node releases that signal through the rest of the system to trigger contraction of the ventricles. After a brief rest period, the SA node will start the whole cycle over again, and again, and again, and again. Pretty cool, huh? Finally, the last structures you need to know about are the pericardium and the coronary arteries. The pericardium, sometimes called the pericardial sac, is a double-layer protective covering over the heart. You're going to hear about this guy later when you talk about chest trauma. The coronary arteries are these blood vessels covering the outside of the heart. They deliver blood and oxygen to the heart muscle itself, and they can sometimes become blocked, leading to what lay people call a heart attack. One more term you might hear is apex. That just describes this point at the bottom of the heart. All right, boys and girls, that's it for this lesson. We've covered the important structures and functions of the heart. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about blood and blood vessels. See you then.